A zombie who survived 1,000 years finally walks back into human society, but the city is not ready for him. By the end, a red-eyed monster turns the streets into a hunting ground, and one girl decides to challenge it head-on. Spoiler warning for chapters 10 through 19 of this Chinese manhua. The setup is that the main character was once just an ordinary zombie in an apocalyptic world, but centuries of being hunted forced him to become absurdly strong. Now he is entering a society filled with agencies, fighters, experiments, and monsters, so his return is less like peaceful reintegration and more like a disaster test that keeps getting bigger. Chapter 10 opens around the pale, white-haired zombie-like lead in formal dark clothing, then moves him into a wide outdoor space near grass, mountains, and buildings. The chapter uses action more than readable dialogue. A long spear-like attack appears, the lead moves through the air, and his landing or strike makes his strength feel overwhelming. That display becomes important when he encounters other people, including a green-haired woman, a dark-skinned man, and two younger characters, one with red hair. Their gathering feels less friendly than cautious, because nobody seems sure how to classify him. The tension then shifts into a darker sequence with a red-eyed skull-like figure, mechanical-looking structures, a black cube, and a heavy impact, hinting that the next threat may be tied to something much larger than a simple confrontation. Chapter 11 shows a hooded, corpse-like man moving through the modern city with terrifying physical ability while the red-haired girl and green-hooded woman remain close to the situation. Instead of treating his power as a one-off gag, the chapter starts building context around it. A cosmic explanation sequence shows Earth, debris, a dark impact, and a shadowy purple figure, suggesting the world has a history of disasters or beings that normal humans cannot handle. The group later reaches a modern organization building marked Shinsengumi, giving the arc an official investigative center. Inside, they meet a white-haired man in a lab coat, then visit a restrained spiky-haired prisoner. The prisoner's reaction is the chapter's key turn. He insists the hooded man is unbelievably strong, possibly beyond his own leader. Chapter 12 pulls several characters toward a large modern building and shifts the story into tense conversations. A black-haired man appears repeatedly as the central figure, first moving through an outdoor area and then speaking inside with the blue-haired man. Nearby, the green-haired woman and the red-haired girl react with visible surprise or irritation, which makes the gathering feel unstable rather than routine. The chapter also shows a red-haired armored or uniformed girl in a more action-focused moment, plus a shadowy hooded figure in a darker space. A glowing armored or helmeted presence and a blonde man appear later, implying that multiple observers or factions are converging around the same mystery. By the end, the building feels less like safety and more like a pressure chamber waiting for the next clash. Chapter 13 narrows the focus to a hospital-like room, where the hooded skull-faced zombie with green hair visits an injured orange-haired young man. The young man is weak but alert, and their conversation appears to pull him back through the violence he just survived. The chapter flashes to allies, a red-haired girl, a dark-haired fighter, zombie-like monsters, blood, and red internal imagery, making the injury feel both physical and possibly supernatural. Even without clear dialogue, the emotional shape is strong. The young man is not simply resting, he is processing a traumatic encounter with beings far beyond ordinary limits. The hooded figure explains something serious, then leaves, while the young man remains shaken. When two girls rush in with alarm, the aftermath becomes another warning that every battle leaves consequences. Chapter 14 introduces a controlled arena or testing facility, with a white-coated figure near a glowing blue space and spectators watching from around an indoor court. At the center stands the skull-masked, green-haired hooded fighter, and the scene feels like a formal attempt to measure what he can do. Several observers react, including a purple-haired woman, a blue-haired person, and a spiky-haired boy, so the test has an audience that understands danger. Then the setting shifts outdoors into an alley-like urban combat zone, where a brown-haired opponent with a mechanical arm fires a powerful red beam. The blast tears through the street and forces nearby people to scramble. The skull-masked fighter survives, closes the gap, and counters with green energy strikes, ending amid smoke and fallen attackers. Chapter 15 raises the scale with a ruined city battle against a large white and black armored enemy. A red-cord object or target appears near the beginning, then the black-haired zombie-like fighter launches through rubble while allies watch from a distance. A skull-masked rider on a skeletal horse joins the fighting, making the battle feel stranger and more supernatural, while a blue-haired companion reacts as the pressure increases. The armored enemy decides to finish things and activates a form or weapon labeled Model 1. Massive red energy slashes carve across buildings and debris, and the battlefield looks impossible to survive. But the fighter does survive, shocking the enemy that expected him to be dead. The chapter ends with his face shifting into a red-eyed zombie-like expression, turning defense into intimidation. Chapter 16 moves into a nighttime urban area, where the pale zombie-like male lead and a blue-haired young woman navigate tense conversations in the dark. The scene becomes dangerous when a dark-haired woman in black and red clothing appears and moves quickly through the street, suggesting pursuit or attack. A large monstrous opponent also enters the fight, and the chapter turns into a blur of speed, impact lines, dodges, and heavy strikes. The blue-haired young woman reacts as the lead is pulled deeper into the clash, but the exact cause of the fight remains unclear from the panels. A huge orange explosion erupts in the city, leaving the immediate result uncertain. Afterward, the chapter widens to another location and ends with a lone figure at sunset, signaling that the fallout is still moving. Chapter 17 shifts from smaller confrontations into a military-controlled operation. It starts with shadowed figures' intense discussion, a weapon-focused beat, and a wounded or unconscious person in bed, so the chapter opens with aftermath and suspicion. Mr. Zombie then appears with companions, including a blue-haired girl and a pink-haired girl, before the story cuts to a large aircraft carrier at sea. That single location change makes the scale feel official and international. At a fortified site, armed guards face a red-marked humanoid monster carrying a blade-like weapon, while other monstrous or undead-looking figures gather nearby. A purple-haired suited man speaks with a large beast-like figure, implying another powerful faction is watching. By the time soldiers shout firing and evacuation orders, the city has become a containment battlefield. Chapter 18 brings the danger into open public view. A lone figure stands or crouches above the city, while two young women, one red-haired and one darker-haired, talk as the threat develops. A male character in a white shirt and dark vest moves through the urban area, and several companions gather as if trying to track what is happening. Then a huge red-eyed, horned monster appears between the buildings, turning the streets into panic. Crowds or civilians fill the area, and the creature charges forward with enough force to create debris and impact across the city space. The main group watches as the monster advances with a menacing grin. The consequence is clear: whatever plan they had, they are now facing something that does not care about buildings, soldiers, or witnesses. Chapter 19 continues the rampage through the city streets. A green-haired young man stands among damage, debris, and fallen figures, while the red-haired girl reacts anxiously from inside or near a vehicle. The black, muscular monster with red glowing eyes and spiked hair carries a heavy weapon, possibly chainsaw-like, and chases civilians for amusement. A white-coated man appears across the street, but his presence does not stop the creature from charging, laughing, and terrifying people who are trying to escape. One man begs for his life, and the monster treats the fear like entertainment. Then the chapter shifts its energy, a distant call draws the beast's attention, a red sneaker steps into view, and a massive multi-barreled gun is aimed. The red-haired girl challenges the monster, ending on direct confrontation. These chapters work because the manhua keeps changing the scale of danger around an overpowered zombie lead. At first, the comedy comes from how casually he survives things that should destroy anyone else. But chapters 10 through 19 make the world respond to that power through Shinsengumi, testing facilities, armored enemies, military forces, and city-level monsters. The supporting cast also starts to matter more. The red-haired girl is not just reacting from the sidelines by chapter 19, she chooses to pull the monster's attention onto herself. That gives the cliffhanger real energy: the city is under attack, civilians are still in danger, and the next fight will test whether courage and firepower can stand beside ancient zombie strength. That is the recap through chapter 19. Subscribe for the next part, where this monster hunt should reveal who can actually survive when the red-haired girl forces the beast to play.